Welcome to Modern Learning on the Air, the InSync training podcast, in conversation with some of the top leaders and thinkers in the modern virtual learning space. We'll learn about the latest virtual classroom techniques, creative training initiatives, and virtual training best practices that will engage and empower your teams, colleagues, and learners. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to another episode of Modern Learning on the Air. In today's episode, we explore the hybrid work culture, integrating learning environments with essential elements of communication, connection, collaboration, and creation. Join Karen Vieth and Jennifer Hofmann as they have a candid conversation and uncover effective strategies for thriving in remote working scenarios. So, Karen, Jennifer, welcome.
So thanks, Jeff. We're excited to be here. You know, Jennifer, we spend a lot of time talking about learning culture. I mean, I just wrote a blog, I think last month, about learning culture and cultivating a learning culture in remote and hybrid teams. You know, the idea behind that, really fostering that environmental engagement of continuous learning, right, and collaboration. Talking about leveraging different technologies and how to create virtual spaces for knowledge sharing, right? And peer-to-peer learning, and really trying to make sure that learning is an integral part of this remote work experience. And we know that hybrid's here to stay. I mean, our own internal research that was out last month indicated that hybrid's here to stay. Research from McKinsey and Company, as well as a recent article I just read in the Harvard Business News, really states that nationally, the percentage of fully remote workers and those working hybrid has stabilized, since 22, really. And more than 25% of those labor hours are delivered remotely, and 40% of the workforce operates in this hybrid work environment. But it dawned on me the other day that we talk a lot about learning culture. We talk a lot about the learning mindset and learner goals, and really focusing in on what types of learner resources we might need to support our hybrid work endeavors. But we don't talk a lot about work culture or how to lead in this this remote and hybrid work environment, right? And so it just dawned on me that if we think about hybrid work culture and how it relates to learning culture, I feel like there's like a bridge. Because if we practice the hybrid model within our work culture kind of on a day-to-day basis, likely the way that we lead in a hybrid environment will change, right? The way that we help our employees learn in a hybrid environment will also change. So I thought it would be really interesting, Jennifer, to ask you to share with everybody the 4 C's that contribute to the success of the hybrid work culture that we've been using for the past 20 years here at InSync.
I actually think that the current conversation is really interesting to me because it's as if this is all new. It's as if there were no hybrid or remote workers 5 years ago or 10 years ago. We were a remote team in 2000. Now, of course, that remote team was only 3 people. But as we developed, we were 3 people, then 6 people, then 12 people, and now over 120 people around the world on this 100% remote team. We used to hide the fact that we were a remote team. We would have a masked telephone. So when people would call in, we would transfer. However, we were just transferring to somebody else's home office. Now it's in and cool and acceptable to be a fully remote team, and people understand it. But they've always been around. But they've also always been challenging. But I don't know if they're more challenging than in a traditional face-to-face work environment. I think that the challenges are just different, or we need to apply them differently. And what we've always used, what I've always believed in when managing a remote team, is what we call the 4 C's: communication, connection, collaboration, and creation. I'm going to talk about them, but I want you to keep in mind that those 4 C's, communication, connection, collaboration, and creation, don't just apply to a work culture, they apply to a learning culture as well. Whatever the makeup and the consistency of your team is, these can all apply. And you need them all.
Mhm.
The first step is communication. We've all been to communication classes. We all have heard that when a initiative fails, it's because we haven't communicated the goals. We misinterpret uh, what it is we're trying to accomplish, or we don't share everything that's on our minds. And that can really get amplified in a hybrid work culture. We can become disjointed, we can become misaligned, everybody's off doing their own thing. So we need to figure out what the norms are for communicating in a hybrid work team, and then really manage those norms and make sure people are following them. Uh, Sometimes we need to be able to talk live, and maybe we get on a Microsoft Teams call and we work through a problem. Sometimes we just need a quick answers to a question, maybe send a text through Microsoft Teams. Sometimes an email will do, and sometimes maybe we're collaborating through a tool like Monday.com to manage our projects. But however we're communicating, we need to have the right norms. That constant text coming in, do you have time? Do you have time? Do you have time? Ding, 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 ding can be very distracting. So some organizations are doing things like no meeting Fridays, or emails, you only have to answer emails in the last 2 hours of the day, or this is the type of reason we should instant message versus send an email. And those types of norms can really help us communicate well. Sometimes we need to be live, and sometimes we need to be some version of what we would call self-paced, but not live.
Mhm.
And that really helps us create a working environment that works no matter what type of work culture you're in. Having those tools in place and having those norms in place also accommodates as the environment changes. Maybe you're working all together for a particular week, or you've got a new member of the team. You start to pull them in and make it the norm. This is how we communicate. This is what's appropriate. And you've constantly got a way to check in. The second C is about connection. If communication is how we communicate, connecting is the reason we communicate. We need to, especially in a hybrid environment, get remote and in office and people on the road working intentionally together. The place to start this connection, I think, is in new hire onboarding, if that's at all possible, to set that this is the way we work, this is the way we connect, and these connections are still valuable even if we're not face to face. Because we know when employees are disengaged, they don't work as well, they're not as productive, turnover is higher. Just like in training, we need to connect constantly, but we need to do it intentionally, not just throw up an idea board or throw up a whiteboard. It's not about activity, it's about meaningful connections. So don't just rely on the tools, use the tools to reach out and make connections with your team. Leaders, you've got to lead by example. You need to make sure that not just you're connected with your direct reports, but they're connected to each other. Things like informal coffee chats, we throw 30-minute virtual baby showers or virtual wedding showers, or maybe a couple of times a year, a coffee hour on a Friday afternoon, which remember might be Friday morning for some of your teammates. Those types of things make people realize that they matter. I'm not saying that this is easy. I mean, as we've grown to a larger team that's global, it's become much harder. And we're actually actively trying to find ways to reignite those connections. So it's a struggle for all of us. The third C is collaboration. So just because we're connected doesn't mean we're working effectively together. But if we are connected, we need the right tools in order to collaborate.
Mhm.
If you're using Microsoft Teams, for example, It's not just about having video. Video doesn't ensure collaboration. The right tools do. I mentioned Monday.com, which is a project management tool that helps us collaborate when we're not live and gives us a basis to something to respond to when we are live. We need to create some safety around this collaboration. It's very easy to uh, disconnect or disengage your team. I remember, and I'm dating myself here, Karen. I remember when we used to watch commercials about the long distance telephone wars. And if you're too young for that, just go and Google it. But they would have 8 people around a conference room, and they're all talking, and 2 people are come in via a conference phone in the middle.
Mhm.
And those people always seem very disconnected to me. At the end of the conversation, we would say, Jeff, do you have anything to add? But there wasn't a real clear way for Jeff to add in the moment. And that's what we almost need to facilitate, that collaboration. It's another connection, right, between creating an effective work culture in the hybrid environment and creating an effective hybrid learning culture. Facilitating that collaboration to ensure everybody's heard and we're building on each other's ideas. That way, we get a lot of diverse perspectives. We can get better outcomes. And let's face it, in this global economy, the diverse perspectives from Brazil and from Africa and from the United States, all putting all those different cultures together can really improve the outcomes, because then we can understand how people are doing business around the world. And once we have the ability to communicate and to connect and to collaborate, the outcome is our fourth C. It's creation. We've got the freedom, we've got some flexibility to brainstorm and innovate no matter where we are. As a matter of fact, using these tools, even when we're all together, really helps that innovation. And innovation is what we really need now. We need to be able to work, be creative, but also be able to, we need to be able to work together creatively and collaboratively. We need to be able to step back, work independently, and bring those ideas back to the larger team. If we can do this, if we can communicate well, if we give the tools to make sure people are connecting, if we can encourage collaboration and therefore give our employees the ability to collaborate and innovate, that will really make our work cultures that much more effective. And they could be a small team of 20, a team like ours that's about 120, or a giant company with 60,000 people in it. The same rules apply. And what's great about it is, since the same rules apply, we can grow and we can create a stronger work culture no matter what the economy throws at us moving forward.
Yeah, Jennifer, it sounds like a balancing act,
It
right?
always is. Yeah.
Communication, connection, collaboration, creation. And when I think about that and how we've made this remote and hybrid uh, workforce work, right? Well, those 4 C's are definitely traits that everyone in the business should work to develop. There's some systems that we have to have in place. You mentioned communication. You mentioned MS Teams. I remember when we used to use Skype, right? And Skype was, we had 7,000 different Skypes going and Skype channels, and we moved to MS Teams, and the change, right, was hard for our team. And it was because it was a different type of engagement communication tool. But the essence is, it's critical to have these different channels for these non-live communications to happen, to establish those norms of use. Just like you mentioned, we have virtual baby showers sometimes, we have virtual going away parties sometimes, we have just virtual happy hours on a Friday, just to connect the team. And without that day to day communication of using either Skype or Slack or MS Teams to be able to connect with our teammates, we wouldn't have a connection with them, which was that next piece that you talked about. And again, I remember, I mean, I've been with you for 18 and a half years, but I remember the very first time I met you. It was actually after I'd been here an entire year. And at the time we used Skype, and we laughed because it was always ting, and we'd say, "Tong," and then you type that, right? And I remember getting off the airplane. We were in Orlando, and I only really had a picture of you because back 18 and a half years ago, we didn't turn on video ever. And I had a picture, but let's face it, our pictures and our real life sometimes don't match, right? And so you had a picture of me, I had a picture of you. But what connected me with you is I heard your voice, and I quickly turned, and yes, there you were, like with the image of your picture, but in 3D. And we hugged. We had never physically met. And I think about that with the 4 Cs, and I think about how we have had this work culture, this hybrid remote work culture that we're calling new. Was it new? But I think about that, and I share this story with so many people over the course of the 18 years that I've been here at InSync, because that connection through that communication tool of Skype at the time was so powerful that it was like meeting a long lost cousin, not a stranger, right? And so I think it's really important for our listeners to really understand that if we focus on what makes a hybrid work culture work smoothly, it's have easy access to communication tools that allow you to communicate on a daily basis. Set some of those norms, like Jennifer mentioned. I mean, I know it's silly, but literally, we have written the word ding in our Skype or MS Teams for the past 18 years that I've been here to just see if someone's available. It's like knocking on a physical door, right? Or peeking over your cubicle to see if somebody's available. The typing of ding allows us in our environment to see whether or not Jennifer's available, Jeff's available, Cindy's available. If we're not, we say in a meeting or connect soon.
Or nothing.
Or nothing. We've created this culture of communication so that everyone here at InSync knows how we work. And that allows for those connections to be true versus maybe reading things that are short and taking offense to them. You know, I think that's another thing that we have to create is, like you mentioned, those ground norms around how to communicate in this Teams world. Because we have to make sure that people feel that connection and then are able then to collaborate. You mentioned something else about the collaboration, and I think about ours, and currently we use MS Teams. We've got, I can't even remember how many channels, but let's say we probably have over 100 different channels. But one of the channels that I love so much that Cindy Foster, our training manager, created was a good to great channel. And that good to great channel allows our team members, mostly our facilitators, to go in and share what's going well in your facilitation, sessions. What's not going well? How can I improve? So it's a way for our team to collaborate and continually improve, right? And then our designers, I know they have a channel where they talk about different e-learning trends and virtual design trends and just trends in general so that they can start to learn and collaborate with each other for that creation. So as we round this out, I'd like to, think about, it starts really with a good hard look at our own internal communication practices, right? If you're going hybrid, take a look at the tools you have. Take a look at how you're using your MS Teams, your Skype, your Slack. Take a look at how you're creating those ground norms. Evaluate how your team interacts. Are you offering enough team connections? And I remember at first I was like, virtual happy hour, really? Okay, this sounds fun. I was a person who actually went to a lot of happy hours when I was in a brick and mortar building, only because it was after work and I had to get home and maybe make dinner, or I wanted to work out or whatever it might have been. I didn't always go, but I don't miss one virtually because I'm right here. I could just go grab something and have a virtual happy hour. So it's just kind of interesting to include all of those different components and I guess constantly look at the team, constantly look at how your team is interacting, because it really is a foundational step and a key to success if you are kind of practicing these 4 C's. It will then come out in that learning culture. So Jennifer, is there anything else when it comes to this balancing act, when it comes to working in a hybrid and remote environment and learning in a hybrid and remote environment, that creates that perfect match?
I think it's constant attention. You've got to not just assume because we've got processes in place that they're working, that it's so easy. It's so easy for us to disengage and not even realize that we're disengaging. We get involved in a project, we go away on vacation, we come back, and we're not in the habit of staying engaged with the remote team.
Mm-hmm.
So it needs to be part of our schedule. Now, we need our time alone. We need to be able to work independently, to make sure our brains are clear, to create our own work, but we need to be intentional about having time on our calendars to connect with our coworkers, to have one-on-ones with our direct reports, especially. And make them meaningful time. So it's not just, oh, I got to talk with Karen again, right? It's maybe we have one goal for every conversation, and that goal is different every time to keep it fun, to keep it engaging, to give me something to prepare for. But
Mm-hmm.
it takes work. It takes work to engage, I think, in a hybrid environment, more work than it does take face to face. And that's the big difference. Both sets of environments, the same tools apply, the same processes apply, but it's a little bit more work when I'm not seeing you walk by me every day. So I like working remotely. I've always been very successful at it. We've got a team that's always been very successful at it, but it does take an investment of attention. And that's really, I think, what it comes down to.
Intention. It's just like what we talk about with designing with intention for the hybrid
Mhm.
remote or the hybrid learning environment. Um, Intentional facilitation. It's paying
Mhm.
attention, right? Whether we're learning remotely, working remotely, living remotely, right? This is where we are. This is what we do. And we need to practice it on a day-to-day basis. Thanks, Jennifer.
Sure thing.
Thank you for tuning into Modern Learning on the Air. For all your training and services needs, visit us at insynctraining.com. And don't forget to sign up for our monthly webinars, where we cover key topics and trends in the learning and development space. Until next time, keep learning and keep growing.